Imagine a world where the most influential book ever written was locked away in a language understood by only a select few. For centuries, the Bible, the cornerstone of Christianity, was primarily accessible in Latin, a language that separated the clergy from the laity, the educated from the masses. This linguistic barrier meant that ordinary people could not read the scriptures for themselves, let alone interpret them. The story of the Bible's translation into vernacular languages, particularly Latin, is a tale of rebellion, innovation, and the relentless pursuit of knowledge. It is a story that reshaped not just religion, but the very fabric of Western civilization. The first major step in breaking this linguistic barrier came in the 4th century, when a scholar named Jerome embarked on a monumental task. Jerome, born in 347 CE, was a man of exceptional intellect and a deep passion for the scriptures. He was commissioned by Pope Damasus to revise the Latin translations of the Bible, which at the time were riddled with inconsistencies and errors. But Jerome's work went far beyond mere revision. He sought to create a new, accurate translation based on the original Hebrew and Greek texts. Jerome's journey was not an easy one. He moved to Bethlehem in 386, where he immersed himself in the study of Hebrew, a language that was not widely known among Christians at the time. He consulted Jewish scholars and the extensive library at Caesarea, which housed Origen's Hexapla, a critical resource containing multiple versions of the Old Testament. Jerome's approach was meticulous. He recognized that the existing Latin translations, especially those of the New Testament, had been contaminated by scribes who attempted to harmonize the Gospels, often inserting material from one gospel into another. Jerome corrected these errors, producing a version that was both more accurate and more faithful to the original texts. The result of Jerome's labor was the Vulgate, a term that did not come into use until the 16th century. The Vulgate became the standard Latin Bible used in the Western Church for over 1,000 years. It included Jerome's translations of the Old and New Testaments, with the exception of the Psalms, which were later revised by others. The Vulgate's influence was profound, shaping the liturgy, theology, and even the language of the Middle Ages. However, its adoption was not without controversy. In some places, like Tripoli, the new translation sparked riots when it was read in church, as the familiar Old Latin version was deeply ingrained in the hearts of the people. Despite initial resistance, the Vulgate gradually gained acceptance, particularly in Italy and Northern Europe, where it became the common or vulgar version, the one that enjoyed the greatest currency. While the Vulgate was the most significant Latin translation, it was far from the only one. Throughout the Middle Ages, the Bible was translated into various languages, often as aids to study. In the 10th century, Saadia Gaon, a Jewish leader in Babylonia, translated the Hebrew Bible into Arabic, a version still used by some Jews in Yemen. Medieval Christian translations also appeared in Ethiopic and several European languages. The Psalms, in particular, were frequently translated to help monks learn to recite them in the liturgy. In Germany, the Psalter fragments from the 9th century and the whole Bible translation by Marchwart by Burleigh in the 14th century are notable examples. The Gothic Bible, translated by Wulfila in the 4th century, is a remarkable early translation into a Northern European language, providing valuable insights into the now extinct Gothic language. In England, the story of biblical translation is particularly rich. Bede, the renowned scholar who died in 735, is said to have been working on an English translation of John's Gospel at the time of his death. King Alfred, who ruled from 849 to 899, is credited with translating the Psalms or patronizing their translation. Aelfric of Winchester in 1010 produced a paraphrase of some Old Testament books, though he was hesitant about translation due to the potential for misunderstanding. The Northumbrian Lindisfarne Gospels, with their interlinear translation in the local dialect of English, is a rare example of a true translation rather than a paraphrase. The Bible was also translated into Slavic languages in the 9th century, thanks to the missionary work of Cyril and Methodius. Their Slavonic Bible, while initially intended for liturgical use, laid the foundation for later translations. The Codex Zografensis, a manuscript from the 10th century, contains all 4 Gospels in a Slavonic version. A complete Slavonic Bible did not appear until the 15th century, but the influence of Cyril and Methodius was profound. The Reformation, beginning in the 16th century, marked a new era in biblical translation. The invention of the printing press by Johannes Gutenberg in 1439 made it possible to disseminate the Bible more widely and quickly than ever before. The period leading up to the Reformation saw a surge in biblical translations, including versions in German, Italian, Dutch, Spanish, and Czech. The Reformation itself was fueled by the desire to make the Bible accessible to the people, and translations played a crucial role in this movement. One of the most significant figures in this period was Martin Luther, who produced a German translation of the New Testament in 1522 and the complete Old Testament in 1534. Luther's Bible was groundbreaking not only for its accuracy, but also for its impact on the German language. He crafted a style that was accessible to most German speakers, despite the many dialects of the language. Luther's New Testament quickly spread throughout Germany and beyond, influencing translations into Dutch, Danish, and Swedish. The Catholic Church, in response, produced its own translations, such as Hieronymus Imser's version, which sought to counter Luther's Protestant interpretations. In England, the story of biblical translation during the Reformation is dominated by the figures of John Wycliffe and William Tyndale. The Wycliffite Bibles, produced in the late 14th century, were the first English translations, though they were met with official opposition due to their association with the Lollard movement. Tyndale, a linguistic genius, produced a New Testament from the Greek in 1526 and began translating the Old Testament from Hebrew. His translations were marked by a distinctly Protestant interpretation, which led to many copies being burned, and Tyndale himself being executed in 1536. Despite his martyrdom, Tyndale's work lived on, influencing subsequent English translations, including the Matthew Bible, the Great Bible, and the Geneva Bible. The Great Bible, published in 1539 under the editorship of Miles Coverdale, became the first official English Bible and was placed in all churches. It drew heavily on Tyndale's work, but also incorporated elements from the Latin Vulgate and Luther's German translation. The Geneva Bible, published in 1560, was a product of English exiles in Geneva and became the Bible of Shakespeare, John Donne, and George Herbert. The Bishop's Bible, published in 1568, was an attempt to create a more moderate version that could bridge the gap between the Great Bible and the Geneva Bible. Finally, the King James Version, published in 1611, was a revision of the Bishop's Bible and became the most influential English translation of all time. The Reformation also saw the production of a Catholic English Bible, the Rheims-Douai translation, which was an English translation of the Vulgate. This version was intended to counter Protestant misuse of scriptural texts and included extensive annotations to guide readers. In conclusion, the translation of the Bible into vernacular languages, particularly Latin, was a transformative force in history. It democratized access to the Scriptures, challenged ecclesiastical authority, and reshaped the cultural and linguistic landscape of Europe. From Jerome's Vulgate to the King James Version, the story of biblical translation is a testament to the enduring power of the written word and the human quest for understanding.